On March 12, 1946, in Budapest, Ferenc Szalasi enters a cold prison yard and faces a wooden pole. He wears a heavy coat, his arms are tied behind his back, and guards close off the last few steps. He had called himself the nation's leader, shaken Adolf Hitler's hand, and told followers that God had chosen him to save Hungary. Now they tie his legs to the pole and pull a rope around his neck. Within 2 minutes, he is hanging there, and the death is photographed in secret. Later, officials even try to bury him under a false name. Then the film leaves the yard and cuts back to January 1897, to Kassa. The pole in Budapest closes one life. The file opens much earlier. In January 1897, Szalasi was born in Kassa, then in Hungary, today Košice. His father was a soldier. His mother was a Catholic with Slovak roots. He later said she fed him faith like milk. In 1915, he became an officer in the Hungarian army. Then came the war. He spent 3 years on the First World War front, not behind a desk or rear lines. He returned with medals, and the army kept moving him upward. These were not paper promotions. By 1924, he made captain ahead of his peers. In 1925, Hungary brought him into its top military staff. He had seen combat first. By 1933, Szalasi was already a major in Budapest. In private, Szalasi kept a hard, narrow routine. People called him a Puritan. He did not drink, did not chase women, did not steal, and even enemies admitted his personal honesty. He prayed every day, lived with his mother until 1944, and later signed orders against Jewish children. In 1933, that inward code turned into a political shift. That private code now moved into politics. By 1933, Szalasi gave the shift a name: Hungarism. He said Hungary had been crippled by the old Trianon Treaty and blamed Jews for modern troubles. He also cast Hungary as the nation meant to lead a Christian rebirth. In 1935, he left the army. He said politics was his calling. He launched a small party, and the government banned it within months. Then he started again under the name Hungarian National Socialist Party, and in 1937 he made it official. Horthy answered in 1938. He sent Szalasi to prison. But prison did not stop it. From his cell, his men assembled the Arrow Cross Party under a green and white cross with arrows in 4 directions, drawn to look old and holy. The public statement made it plain. In June 1943, Szalasi said Jews ruled the world through politics, money, banks, Freemasonry, and Marxism. Hatred sat at the center. He believed it for real. He tied hatred to Christianity. Hitler built racism on biology. Szalasi built his on religion. He thought he did God's work. He was not greedy or corrupt. That conviction would soon kill thousands. In October 1944, Szalasi's beliefs became state power. For most of the war, Hungary stayed beside Germany. Horthy sent Hungarian troops against the Soviet Union, but for years he refused to send Hungarian Jews to the death camps. Then the break came. Horthy tried to pull Hungary out. He told the Soviets he wanted peace. Hitler answered within hours. German troops kidnapped Horthy's son, and German tanks entered Budapest under Operation Panzerfaust. The pressure worked. On October 16, 1944, German troops forced Horthy down at gunpoint, and Hitler put Ferenc Szalasi in his place. Szalasi took the oath at once. No pause. On November 4th, he renamed the country. He canceled the peace move and ordered every man to keep fighting. He took power after the war had already entered Hungary. Soviet troops were inside the borders. Romania and Bulgaria had changed sides, and American and British planes were already bombing Budapest. That order to keep fighting reached the streets at once. Around 200,000 Jews still lived in Budapest. They had survived the spring roundups. No exit remained. Arrow Cross gangs moved through the capital in green shirts. They dragged families from homes and pushed them toward the Danube, which divides Buda from Pest. The route was fixed. In the winter of 1944, they tied people together and forced them to remove their shoes at the embankment. Then they fired so the bodies dropped into the cold river. Bronze shoes still line that walk on the Pest embankment. they mark the place. Across 163 days, Arrow Cross men killed between 10 and 15,000 Hungarian Jews inside Hungary. They drove tens of thousands more toward Austria. Many froze, starved, or fell to bullets when they could not keep walking. Roma communities were hunted too. Szalasi signed the orders and sent the men. By November 1944, Soviet and Romanian armies were closing on Budapest. The front changed his route at once. On December 9th, Szalasi left Budapest for a small town near the Austrian border, carrying Hungary's crown regalia with him. He carried the regalia out of the capital even as the fighting closed in. Each stop after that took him farther west and farther from Budapest. By March 1945, he was in Vienna, and from there he moved again to Munich. At the end of April, he was hiding in the small alpine town of Matsay. On May 6th, American soldiers entered the town, only 2 days before Germany lost the war. Szalasi did not resist. He tried to claim that a foreign head of state could not be touched, but the argument failed. For 5 months, the Americans held him and questioned him. He answered with long religious speeches about destiny, blamed Jews for Hungary's fall, and showed no regret. He showed no regret. On October 3rd, they handed him to the new Hungarian government. He was flown back to Budapest in chains and placed in a special cell in the basement of the same building that had housed his Arrow Cross headquarters. In February 1946, his trial began in Budapest. That basement cell led to a public courtroom. In February 1946, the People's Court opened Szalasi's case inside Budapest's Ferenc Liszt Music Academy. It turned the music hall into a courtroom because the regular courts were already full. The building had no heat, and judges, witnesses, and Szalasi kept their heavy coats on through every session. Prosecutors charged him with war crimes and high treason. He entered calmly. He did not claim innocence. He said faith had guided him, God had chosen him, and Hungarism was divine teaching. He said nothing about the murdered Jews. Then the papers spoke. Survivors of the Danube killings testified, and former officers who had served under him testified after them. Clerks read signed orders and telegrams to Berlin that promised loyalty until the last bullet. By March 1st, the court had its verdict and ordered death by hanging. The execution was set for March 12, 1946. 11 days later, the cold prison yard on Marco Street in Budapest became the final stage of the sentence. 4 condemned men came out together that morning. Ferenc Szalasi, former Interior Minister Gabor Vanya, former Defense Minister Karoly Beregvi, and party ideologue Joseph Guerra. Each had helped order, plan, or defend the killings. A Catholic priest stepped up to Szalasi before the execution, and he received the last sacraments with a calm face. After the final communion, they led him toward the wooden post. The rite ended, and the procedure narrowed to wood and rope. No modern gallows stood there. Hungarian executioners used the Austrian pole method, with the rope fixed to a hook at the top. It was an older setup, not a long drop gallows built for a fast fall. Szalasi climbed a few narrow steps, and they set his back against the post. His legs were tied, and his arms were already bound behind him. Then the rope went on. They drew it tight against the hook, and the steps were pulled away under him. Because the post was short, he likely died by strangulation, not by the rapid neck break of a standard drop. No quick blackout followed. An official photographer raised his camera for the record. A second man hid nearby. Without permission, he took 32 black and white photographs, and those images later surfaced at an American auction under the label of an unknown Hungarian. Researchers later proved the condemned man was Szalasi. His 3 ministers were hanged after him on the same post. He was 49 years old. That left one more problem: Szalasi's body. He was buried in a public cemetery in Budapest, in plot 298, and the new Hungarian secret police feared Arrow Cross loyalists might dig him up. They altered the burial papers, entered the corpse under the false name Ferenc Lukács, and even changed his birth record. The grave never became a gathering point. In 2008, historian Tomasz Kovacs proved the switch. For more than 60 years, The cemetery papers carried the name Ferenc Lukács. The papers were not done. That false burial name hid one more failure. One day after the hanging, on March 13, 1946, the National Council of People's Tribunals still reviewed Szalashi's mercy appeal. They refused it. The file moved on. The Justice Minister sent that answer to President Zoltan Tildy. He signed the death sentence on March 15th. By then, Szalasi had already spent 3 days in the grave under a name that did not exist. That delayed paperwork closes the legal file, but it still leaves the man himself in view. Szalasi is hard to judge. He carried medals for bravery. In the First World War, his own men respected him, and he lived in a small home. He prayed every day, and by personal standards, he looked disciplined, faithful, and honest. His private discipline changed nothing. He ordered the deaths of thousands, and he signed papers that sent Jewish families to the river. At the wooden pole in the yard, with the rope at his neck, he still believed God stood beside him. The contrast remains on record. Officials removed the photographs, gave the grave another name, and banned the party. Even then, the file stayed open. Szalashi's case did not end with one sentence. The next judgment reached beyond the man to the regime, which avoided trial for almost 3 decades before it finally faced a courtroom. Ferenc Szalasi,